Have you ever had one of those weeks where you look at your calendar or, your habit tracker, and on paper, you are absolutely crushing it? You're sticking to the routine, you're ticking off every single box, maybe you're even hitting all your spiritual goals, praying, going to services, the whole 9 yards. You are doing everything right.
But
But despite all that activity, you feel completely empty or stuck.
oh, absolutely. It's the worst kind of stuff because you don't have an obvious reason for it. You can't point to it and say, well, I'm being lazy, because you aren't.
Exactly.
It's that sensation of running on a treadmill. You're exhausted, you're sweating, you're putting in the work, but the scenery hasn't changed in miles.
Exactly. And usually when we feel that way, the advice we give ourselves, or at least the advice I give myself, is, well, I guess I just need to do more.
Right.
If I'm feeling flat, I should add another chapter to the reading, or volunteer for another committee, or say another set of prayers. We default to volume.
Right. The more's better trap. It's the idea that if the medicine isn't working, just triple the dose.
But today, we are unpacking a deep dive that completely flips that idea on its head. We're looking at some really challenging and honestly quite refreshing material from Father Paulo Ricardo regarding spiritual direction. And he centers this discussion around a concept called tibieza.
Which is usually translated as lukewarmness.
Right, lukewarmness. Now, I have to be honest, when I hear lukewarm, I usually think of the bad religious person, the person who sleeps in on Sunday or who just doesn't care.
The couch potato of faith.
Yeah, exactly. But that is precisely the misconception Father Paulo is trying to dismantle. He argues that tibieza, lukewarmness, isn't necessarily laziness. You can be frantically busy, you can be incredibly disciplined, and you can still be lukewarm.
So he's not talking about a lack of activity.
Not at all. He's talking about a specific kind of spiritual physics where you are, like you said, just running in place.
And that distinction really hooked me. The source material frames this not just as a personal slump, but as a kind of epidemic within the church.
An epidemic, yeah.
We're talking about people who ostensibly look like they have it all together, they have a routine. But Father Paulo argues that you can go an entire day doing all the religious things without performing a single genuine act of love.
That is a heavy statement. An epidemic of people who think they love God because they have a routine. It's the difference between maintenance mode and actual life.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how to break that cycle. We want to debunk the myth that volume equals value and explore this really counterintuitive idea that one moment of intensity, real intensity, is worth more than 1,000 hours of autopilot.
It's about moving from maintenance mode to growth mode.
Because as we'll see, and this is crucial, in the spiritual life, maintenance mode is actually myth. It doesn't exist.
Okay, let's get into the diagnosis then. Because the source material doesn't start with heavy theology. It starts with a story that is oddly relatable, even though it's about a 12-year-old boy. Father Paulo shares this anecdote about his own childhood. Apparently, he was a very pious kid.
Paulo Breviary.
Yes, Paulo Breviary. He says at age 12, he was carrying around the Liturgy of the Hours, this big blue book, the prayer of the time, everywhere he went.
Everywhere.
To school, walked around with it on the playground. The other kids, of course, made fun of him, hence the nickname.
And let's be real, to an adult looking in, that looks like a prodigy.
Yeah.
That looks like incredible dedication for a middle schooler.
Exactly. You'd look at that kid and think, he's set for life. But he looks back on Paulo Breviary now and says something kind of shocking. He says, I had devotions, but I lacked devotion.
That is the crux of the whole discussion,
Yeah.
the difference between the plural and the singular.
Yeah.
Devotions, plural, are the external acts. The blue book, the rosaries, the novenas, the structure. Devotion, singular, is the internal promptness,
Yeah.
the fire, the determination to please God.
So he was collecting the external badges, but the internal engine wasn't really running.
Precisely. And he uses this to describe a trajectory that happens to a lot of people. You have that initial conversion, maybe it's a retreat or a moment of insight, and it's like a boiler firing up. You have high heat. The source calls this the chicken flame.
Which is a hilarious image, by the way.
It's unglamorous, but it's accurate. You know how a chicken flies? It's not graceful. It launches up with a lot of noise and energy, feathers flying everywhere. It gets up to the perch. And then inevitably, what happens?
It flutters back down to the ground. It can't sustain the altitude.
You can't. So the chicken flight is that cycle of cooling down. You start hot, but then gravity takes over.
Right.
And Father Paulo describes this shift into what he calls moralism. Can you unpack that? Because usually we think of having morals as a good thing.
Yeah, that's not a bad word.
In this context, moralism is a trap. Think of it as fulfilling obligations just to keep your record clean. You're doing the thing, going to confession, saying the prayers, essentially to clear the slate or avoid guilt.
You're ticking the box so you don't get in trouble.
So you're physically present, but mentally checked out. Worse, he describes it as being inside the church physically, but staring out the window, secretly envying the people outside who are having fun in the secular world.
Oof, that window envy, like, I'm here because I have to be, but I wish I was there.
Exactly. It's viewing the spiritual life as a burden to be endured, rather than a relationship to be enjoyed. And that is the breeding ground for tibieza, for lukewarmness. It's doing the right things with the wrong heart.
And this leads us to the central metaphor of this deep dive, which I think completely changes how we visualize progress, the escalator.
This one really stuck with me. Because usually we think of the spiritual life as a ladder, right? You climb up, you stop, you catch your breath, you climb some more.
Sure.
If you stop climbing on a ladder, you just stay where you are.
Right. A ladder is static, but the source argues that the spiritual life is dynamic. It is actually a descending escalator.
A down escalator.
Always moving down. The pressure of the world, our own tendencies, entropy, everything is pulling us backward. So if you stand still on a down escalator, what happens?
You go backwards. You regress.
Exactly. There is no standing still. And this is where the definition of the lukewarm person gets really interesting. The lukewarm person isn't the one standing at the bottom doing nothing.
No.
The lukewarm person is the one walking up the escalator, but walking at the exact same speed that it is moving down.
That is such a frustrating image.
Yeah.
They're expending energy, they're moving their legs, they're sweating.
But relative to the ground, they are stationary. They aren't going anywhere.
That, according to Father Paulo Ricardo, is the definition of tibieza. It's not the person doing nothing. It's the person doing just enough to not slide into hell, but not enough to actually reach the top.
Wow.
They are maintaining a position that is constantly trying to drag them down.
They're treading water. Or treading escalator in this case.
And the key term he uses here, and it's a Portuguese term, pegada, translates roughly to grip or traction. The lukewarm person's acts are loose. They're remiss. They lack traction. They're moving, but they aren't digging in.
Grip. I like that. It's the difference between walking casually and sprinting, or maybe hiking with intention versus just shuffling your feet.
For sure.
So we have this diagnosis. We are walking up a down escalator, maybe even exhausting ourselves, but we aren't getting anywhere because we lack this grip. So what is the cure? Because my instinct, like we said at the beginning, is to just walk faster, do more stuff.
But if you just add more stuff with that same loose grip, you're just adding weight, not speed. You're going to burn out. To understand the cure, we have to switch metaphors. We have to stop thinking about steps and start thinking about fire.
Okay, let's talk fire. The source simply says, love is a fire.
Right. So imagine your soul as a house. When you go to confession or you are in a state of grace, the candle is lit, the flame is there, you aren't in the dark. But a candle flame is small.
It's fragile.
It's fragile. A draft can blow it out. And the goal isn't just to keep the candle from blowing out. We aren't just trying to survive the spiritual life.
No, the goal is sanctity, and sanctity is a bonfire. It consumes the entire house. You want a blaze.
So how do you turn a candle into a bonfire? You have to add fuel, you have to add wood.
And the lukewarm person is described as someone living on a spiritual minimum wage.
I love that phrase, spiritual minimum wage. It means you're adding just enough fuel, maybe a twig here and there, to keep the flame flickering, to avoid mortal sin.
Just enough to get by.
You don't want the fire to go out completely, but you aren't interested in making it roar either. You're negotiating with God. I'll give you this much, but don't ask for more.
So how do we make it roar? This brings us to the mathematics of grace, which relies on some heavy theology from St. Thomas Aquinas and a teacher named Father Antonio Royo Marin. And honestly, the math here doesn't make sense to our modern, productivity-obsessed brains.
It really doesn't. We are conditioned to think quantity leads to quality. But here, the principle is, one single intense act of charity is worth more than 1,000 tepid, routine acts.
Wait, let's just pause on that. 1 is greater than 1,000? That sounds impossible.
It sounds impossible until you look at the physics of habit formation. Think of it this way. If you want to raise the temperature in a room from 70 degrees to 80 degrees, you can't do it by pumping in more air that is 70 degrees.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if you pump in 1,000,000 cubic feet of 70-degree air. The room will just get windy, but it won't get hotter.
Because the air you're adding isn't changing the environment.
Exactly. To raise the temperature, you must introduce heat that is hotter than the current environment. You need intensity.
So doing 1,000 things mumbling prayers while checking your grocery list, going to services just to be seen. That's just pumping in room temperature air.
Precisely. It doesn't increase your habitual degree of charity. It maintains it, maybe, but it doesn't grow it. Father Paulo gives this specific example of the rosary. He says one Hail Mary said with burning devotion, where you are truly connecting with God, engaging your will, intending to please Him, is infinitely more valuable than an entire rosary mumbled out of boredom just to get it over with.
That is incredibly freeing, but also really challenging. Because, let's be honest, it's easier to just mumble the rosary. It's easier to tick the box.
Of course.
I did my 50 Hail Marys, now I can watch TV.
It is easier. That's the path of least resistance. That's the Paulo Breviary trap. He had the devotions, the plural, the acts, the checklist. But he didn't have the devotion, the singular internal fire.
So true.
The danger is that we overload ourselves with so many devotions that we suffocate the devotion. We bury the fire under a pile of wet, rotten wood.
So if we want to stop suffocating the fire and actually add some dry wood, some intense fuel, what does that look like practically? The source material gives us some advice from some absolute heavy hitters: St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Peter of Alcantara, St. Teresa of Avila.
It does. And it starts with rethinking how we approach prayer time. I think a lot of us have what you call the homework mentality.
Oh, totally. I have to read this chapter of the Bible before bed.
Yeah.
And you're reading it, and your eyes are skimming the words, and you're just rushing to get to the bottom of the page so you can turn off the light.
You're not absorbing it, you're just getting through it. You're treating it like a task to be completed. But St. Peter of Alcantara offers a counter rule that feels almost rebellious.
Okay.
He says, if you are reading and you hit a specific verse or a thought that feeds you, something that sparks a little bit of love or insight, stop.
Stop reading, even if I haven't finished the chapter.
Stop immediately. Put the book down. He says you have found the food. Why would you keep hunting if you've already caught the prey?
That goes against every type A instinct I have. I want to finish the assigned portion.
That's the Paulo Breviary in you. St. Peter says, stay with that thought. Milk it for all it's worth. If that one verse is adding fuel to the fire, why would you move on to the next paragraph just to say you finished?
You're trading gold for copper.
Right. It requires a total shift in mindset. It's not about, I read 3 chapters. It's about, did I connect?
St. Thomas Aquinas backs this up perfectly. He asks, how long should prayer last? And his answer is essentially, it should last exactly as long as necessary to excite fervor. Not more, but not less.
Not more, but not less. So if it takes 5 minutes to get that fire burning, great. If it takes an hour, great. But once the fire is burning, you don't need to keep striking the match.
Exactly. And conversely, if you force yourself to grind on for another hour just because you think you should, even after the connection is made or lost, that's when it becomes tedious.
That's when the damp wood smothers the flame. You lose the grip.
Now, we need to clarify something really important here, because when we talk about fervor or fire or connection, I think a lot of people, myself included, immediately think of emotions. We think of goosebumps or tearing up or feeling warm and fuzzy.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a major trap. The source is very careful to distinguish this. St. Teresa of Avila is quoted here, and she is very blunt. She says love is not thinking much. So it's not intellectualism, and it's not feeling much. It's not sentimentalism.
So it's not about the shivers or the zaps.
No. In fact, Father Paulo warns against the mindset where you judge your prayer by whether you cried or felt an emotional high. That's dangerous. That's essentially spiritual gluttony. St. Teresa defines love as the determination of the will to please God and to avoid offending Him.
Determination of the will. That sounds much more sturdy than feelings. Feelings change with the weather or how much coffee I've had.
Exactly. It's a choice. It's looking at God saying, I choose you. I want to do this for you, even if you feel dry as a bone. That act of the will, that choice to push up the escalator, even when you don't feel like it, that is the high temperature fuel. That is what counts.
Okay, so we've got the prayer side of things. Stop when you're fed, focus on the will, not the feels. But what about the rest of the day? Most of us aren't monks. We're in traffic, we're at work, we're dealing with toddlers screaming or bosses emailing at 9 p.m. How do we add wood to the fire in the middle of a chaotic Tuesday?
This is my favorite part of the deep dive, because it transforms the absolute annoyances of life into something valuable. The source calls it oblation.
Oblation, that's a fancy theological word for offering, right?
Yes, offering something up. Father Paulo suggests taking specific negatives, things that are happening to you anyway, and actively offering them to Jesus as an act of love.
Give me some examples, make this real.
Okay, let's say you have a debt you're worried about. Or you have a nagging illness, just a headache that won't go away. Or a family argument, someone slanders you or misunderstands you. Normally, what do we do with those things?
We complain, we vent, we endure them and wait for them to be over.
We suffer passively, we let the escalator drag us down. But the person with grip, the person fighting lukewarmness, takes that passive annoyance and turns it into active fuel. You say, Jesus, this headache, I accept it and I offer it to you as an act of love. I'm uniting this little bit of suffering with yours.
So you're taking the trash of your day, the bad stuff, and using it as firewood.
Exactly, and that transforms the moment. Suddenly, you aren't just a victim of a bad day. You are a priest offering a sacrifice. You are adding wood to the bonfire. That is how you walk up the escalator faster than it goes down. Not by adding more rosaries necessarily, but by putting intensity and intention into the suffering you're already experiencing.
It really changes how you look at a bad day. Instead of, why is this happening to me? It's, oh, look at all this fuel I can burn.
It turns the mundane into the mystical. That's the cure for lukewarmness. It's not escaping your life to go live in a monastery. It's grabbing your actual life with both hands, that pagoda, that grip, and lifting it up.
Grip. I think that's the word I'm going to take away from this. It's about having traction. It's about not sliding.
It really is. Because remember, the alternative is the escalator carrying you down. Maintenance is a myth. You're either cooling down like the chicken flight or you're feeding the fire. There's no middle ground.
So, as we wrap this up, let's recap the journey we've been on. We started with the problem, tibieza. Not laziness, but a lack of intensity, running in place. We looked at the diagnosis. We are on a down escalator, and just doing the minimum wage routines keeps us stationary.
And we found the cure. Quality over quantity. One intense act of will is worth 1,000 mumbled words. We need to stop treating prayer like homework to be finished and start treating it like fuel to be burned.
And we learned that we can use everything, even our debts, our arguments, our headaches, as wood for the fire. We don't have to change what we do, but how we do it.
That's the shift. It's moving from devotions plural, external, to devotions singular, internal. It's letting the house catch fire.
So here's the final provocative thought for you to carry with you today. If you could see your spiritual life right now as that escalator, be honest with yourself. Are you actually gaining ground, or are you just balancing out the descent?
And to make it practical, what is one piece of wood sitting in front of you right now? Maybe a task you're dreading, a person who is annoying you, or even a small joy you can throw on the fire right this second, instead of just letting it pass you by.
Don't just endure it, use it. Thanks for diving in with us.
Until next time.